Thank you for coming to Witness Underground Podcast, episode 15. Today we have a guest, David Quesada from the Bloody Tuesdays and ExJW, who has been making a bunch of music in the last year. Some quick news for Witness Underground. On February 24th, it's a Thursday night, I'm planning to do a watch party for Witness Underground for patrons and Season Spark people. And if you want to get in on watching that, send me an email or message me on social. So February 24th, watch party and Q&A. It'll be a Vimeo stream in real time. And then another cool thing is Wesley David from Wesley David Music just came out with a new single yesterday on Valentine's Day called Glass Half Full. You should check that out on Spotify and Apple Music. Related news, I went to see Wesley David play live. He played a show nearby in Santa Monica. And I got to meet our guest, David, from the Bloody Tuesdays. We've been chatting on and off for the last year. So we got to hang out after the show and get to know each other, have some fun, a couple drinks, and he was excited to come on. David, why don't you introduce yourself?
I was raised at JW, fourth generation. So I've been in it pretty deep and kind of made it official in 2017. I got out and then started the journey outside of it right before the pandemic. So it's been quite a roller coaster.
The themes of your music are really on point for someone who left. I was going to ask you how long you've been out because you're like really hitting the religion hard with your albums, I think.
Yeah. And
it's fun. Officially
made it out in 2017, but I was probably physically and mentally out from about 2010. And then, every year it just gradually got worse and worse till I finally just couldn't hide it anymore and kind of came out in 2017.
If you left in 2010, both physically and mentally, what was the transition in 2017?
So at the time I was having my fourth child and almost lost my ex-wife and our child because of the blood issue.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I just sat there thinking, okay, like it just got real, it's so your world and your life for so long that you don't really think about it. But when something that real happens, like you really have to choose, like, do I take it this seriously? Waiting and not knowing whether they're going to come out alive and just thinking, if God can forgive a rapist or a murderer, but he can't forgive me for saving a baby, I just couldn't, the cognitive dissonance was just too much.
Wow. And
they happened to survive the surgeries, but the doctor had told us like the chances of both of them coming out alive aren't very good. And it was an emergency birth. So after that, I told myself, if I'm willing to die for this, I'm willing to sacrifice people for this, it has to be 100% or I'm out. And I had a pretty vast collection of like really old books going back to Russell and beforehand. And I just told myself, everything seems to just be based on this whole 1914 ideology. And if that's, bull, then I know it can't be true. So I just went back to the original books, read everything and found out about, the masonry, the pyramidology, the numerology, all its connections to all this other stuff. And I was just flabbergasted. I read those books for about 2 days straight. Like I took them with me to work.
Like the Silver Lamp series, the red book.
Yeah, the Silver Lamp books and all that. And I had to read it for myself. I wanted to make sure that if anybody ever confronted me, I could say, I only read our own books.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that. I don't know why that was such a big issue for me, but it just, to me, I just figured if I can prove it with our own books, there's no argument against that. And that's eventually what happened after the fact when everybody kind of found out about me.
Good thing.
So how did that happen? I mean, you said that you were physically and mentally out. You almost lost your wife and child because of the blood thing. So you were clearly pretty committed to sticking it out. And when you did your research and you decided, no, this isn't true, I've got, and I can get there with just our own publications. I don't need to go read, Sam Harris. I can do this, right? How did you proceed from there? Like, how did you who did you tell? What happened? Like, I'm curious. Like, I know, that there's a decision point where you can even go like, I know this is done,
Yeah.
and yet you
Yeah.
still have to make a choice.
It was such a shock to my mental health and system that I had to just process it on my own for a while. So I didn't really tell anybody. And it just felt like I was conscious in a dream, but there was no way to wake anybody else up. So, and it just overwhelmed me with just how much tragedy was connected to this religion. Going from willing to die for it to, oh my God, people have lost spouses, children, parents that they're never going to see again. And all these false promises we got talked to. Well, if you had a bad relationship with this person, you'll see him again. There's this sense of putting it off into the future in this religion, and then just being overwhelmed by like how much suffering has really taken place with the human race, and how much suffering has taken place just because of this religion that I was trying to get people to join was so overwhelming that I was probably just stuck in my own mind for about 2 months without telling anybody.
Mm.
And then I kind of got the courage to tell my ex-wife, and then it took her a while to process it, because her response was basically like, I think you're right, but I don't know how to let go of it yet. So she still kind of continued to go to meetings every now and then. And I kind of just stopped going for a while, grew out my beard, like just didn't tell anybody. I tried to kind of just escape without notice.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized like how much of a cult it is, when just not going anywhere, not talking to anybody, just enacted everybody's programming around me. Like my family, who I thought I could trust, friends I thought I could trust, like it just frightened me how quickly like the programming could turn on my own parents. And I just didn't know who any of these people were anymore. And yeah, eventually they just noticed I wasn't going. And then one day my parents asked me to take them to a doctor's appointment. And while my mom was like getting a heart check or something, my dad just full on like attacked me about being a witness. And that's kind of how I got outed out. Was my father confronted me, and I explained to him what I found. And they both had very like different reactions. My mother was kind of like cognitive dissonance. She was like, I know you're really smart. I know how seriously you took this. I know how much you know the Bible. So I know it must have been something that's caused you to start thinking these things or seeing these things and seeing this point of view. And my father was just more like, looked at my mother, said, you're never talking to him again. We need to leave. And they left. And after that, it was for about 2 or 3 months, it was just constant random visits from friends and family. And every time they'd come over and get into a discussion with me, they couldn't accuse me of going the apostate route, because everything I brought to their attention was from their own books.
Mhm.
Every conversation ended with, we need to end this conversation now. Every single one of them, friends, family, elders, pioneers, like you name it, that was always the end of the conversation. They just didn't have anything to say. It's kind of like, oh, I see I'm going to lose this chess game, so we're just going to leave.
Mhm.
And it was about 2 or 3 months of that. And we were living with my in-laws at the time because of the hardship that the emergency of the labor had on our family. We were living with witness family. So when they found out about us, after they realized that they couldn't convince us, they basically kicked us on the street, and we were homeless. And then the pandemic hit. So it was just like the worst of all timing. And because it happened so closely to the pandemic, like it created this whole like attack from my friends and family of like, well, you see, like Jehovah's, you see what happened, you left Jehovah and now look what's going on, without
So
them
it's
even.
your fault, David.
Yeah.
The pandemic.
Now we finally
Oh,
know.
man, I
It was
thought
all
it was
because of me.
virus.
Had nothing to do with Integrity Farms or a bat or Mickey Mouse or
No, it was David the whole time.
Yep.
Damn, wow, that's so fresh and recent and
that is
crazy.
Oh man, dude, my heart goes out to you. That is just brutal. Because
Oh,
I mean, I've had like 18 years since going through my brutal stuff, and yours is so fresh. Like that just happened.
yeah. Yeah. We went from almost losing 2 family members to losing our religion. Then we lost our house. Then the pandemic hit. And it was just,
Sorry, I'm so sorry, brother.
it's been yeah, it's been quite an experience. But at the worst of it, I would still remember, like, I'd rather be cold and on this curb than following this still. Like, no matter how bad it was, it's just like, at least like I'm who I am. At least I can be who I am. And I'd rather do that than live this fake life. I have plenty of family and friends that I know for a fact are only in it because they're so terrified of their family leaving them and abandoning them and having to go through all that issues of, no social network and starting from scratch and living on the street. Like, it's crazy how many people have to go through that. And experiencing it, I realize why the suicide rate can be so high for people that leave a controlled religion, because you lose your whole entire life, but you're still forced to live.
Well, it does wind up feeling like the purpose of the policy is the cruelty, because
Yeah.
it's got to scare people to keep them in.
Yep.
Right. If it was less cruel, if it was just humane, live and let live. I've never met anybody outside the witnesses who would not allow their family members who shun them back in their lives if they stopped shunning them. Right. Like it's an absolute one-way street, but they have to just demonize anybody who leaves. And honestly, I think they have to, the worse your life is, the better example it is for
Oh
someone
yeah.
on the
Oh yeah.
fence. My God, that's just garbage.
Oh yeah. The congregation I went to totally turned my parents into martyrs. They just loved the attention, I'm sure. But
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The best quotes I know is what the difference between a religion and a cult is what happens when you leave.
Yeah. That's the cold hard truth.
That is very true.
Your story is such a perfect example of, it's very nuanced, but it's mind programmed. Like you said, the programming came up for all these people to the point you didn't even recognize who your parents were anymore.
Yeah.
Were you close to them? Were you hanging out with them on a regular basis?
Yeah. Especially with my mom. Like, she was just always my friend. Like, she kind of had that mentality when it came to raising kids, so I really didn't have to hide stuff from her. She always was pretty communicative. We'd go out to eat every week and then just could go from that to, like, I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore. It was pretty shocking. It was pretty shocking to the system.
Do you have if you don't mind me asking, I mean, if it gets too personal, just say I don't really feel like that saying that, but do you have family members at all who aren't witnesses? You said you're fourth generation, so I'm wondering if you've got any extended family who are not witnesses who you maybe haven't been connected to well in the past.
Yeah, not really. I maybe had about 3 or 4 cousins, but they're mostly out of state, or they've just been so in their outside of the organization. Like, most of my cousins weren't baptized, but a lot of them were still, like, in it because they still kind of believed it, but were from the mentality of, I'd rather just live my life even if Jehovah doesn't approve of it. Which was really shocking to me, because I did reach out to a lot of them, and a lot of them were still, even though they have been physically out, were not involved or connected at all. When I would talk to them, they still had that whole mentality of, ooh, but you left Jehovah, like. And it's just like, well, and yeah, they still kind of believed in it. So
you didn't go the quote unquote apostate route, though. You didn't write a letter and disassociate or any of that, or
I eventually did, because even though I never had, like, a judicial meeting, even though I never had any announcements or anything, because I think it just was difficult for them, because they really couldn't put a label on me, because everything I quoted was their own stuff. And that was kind of what I think put them in an awkward situation. And so, but after all the anger of being betrayed, being kicked out, I eventually did write a letter. But as far as I know, like, they never, like, accepted it because I never heard back from them. I never heard an announcement that I was disfellowship. So I don't know what ended up happening with that, but I just
I wrote a
figured,
letter too, and I never found out what happened with it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe they don't do that announcement, or maybe, I mean, like you, I was already being shunned before I did it. So you're kind of your connection back to the mothership is severed, and so you don't necessarily know.
yeah,
You know, they may have made an announcement about you, and
yeah, could
I
be.
know of at least one person, another person who wrote a letter as well, who found out through the grapevine that they simply had like a one sentence thing where they just said, you know, X is no longer a Jehovah's Witness at the, like the end of the service meeting. And that was it.
Yeah,
They didn't explain anything. And so I don't know, maybe you got your last mention, but you may never know either. Man,
yeah. I
Oh.
probably won't. But yeah, once I got labeled as an apostate, I just said, well, might as well just write a letter then. You know, like
see,
at
Scott,
that point-
it's fun. You should write one too.
oh yeah, I let
Yeah.
them have it. I let them
mean,
have it.
For years, I wanted to for years, and then I realized like the act of doing it would feel good for me, but it also gives them control, more control in my life. And
Yeah.
that's like your family can never talk to you unless they leave or until they die. You know, like someone dies, then that's it. But if you just are in the gray area, I felt like there might be a chance I'd have a relationship with my family, but
Oh, yeah.
it still didn't. They still cut me out completely. So
Yeah, I totally, that's what postponed me from writing one for so long, was I figured if it's not official, you know, but it a lot of that depends too on how seriously the family you're leaving takes it. Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of families that are very secretive about, I have family that still keeps in contact with my cousin that's been disfellowship for like 25 years, but they keep a very low profile. They don't tell anybody. But then there's people that even if there's not an announcement, they're going to shun you.
yeah, the
Now,
shunning is
here's-
like day one. You're just treated like that.
Yeah.
It's emotional
Oh, yeah.
abuse, and they want to control you with emotional abuse.
That's
It's their
exactly-
only tool.
It really is. It really is. And once you're willing to lose that, there's really nothing they have over you.
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
kind of fired their last bullet at that point.
Yeah, it really is.
They really jumped the gun. Oh, look at these gun references.
Okay. So speaking of not guns, I have music questions.
Sure.
Were you making music when you were a witness?
So I was around, I'd say around 2011, 2012. I had played music all my life, but you know, you're kind of forced to give that up as an adult because you're supposed to be busy in the congregation. But after I hit about 30 and started just questioning life and religion and everything, I started smoking weed, and it just sparked my love of music again. Like I had gone for years without touching my guitar, without listening to music, like just cut music out of my life because it was such a passion for me. And I knew, you know, you couldn't do both. And I started writing music again and playing music, and it was all happening while I was still a witness. Yeah.
Is it more a solo thing, or did you have a group?
No, it's always been a solo thing. Because when I first started writing music again, because you know, I was experimenting with stuff, the subject matter I knew was just going to be too outside the JW world. And so I had a cousin helping me for a while who's a brilliant musician. And once he kind of started seeing where the music was headed, he started exiting out of it. So even though my first album I wrote while I was still a witness, like the subject matter is basically about the alienation of questioning it, leaving it while everybody else is still there.
Is that first one on the Bandcamp, or is that?
Yeah, that's the first one on there, called Stranded on Saturn.
Light was likened to a stone, precious, clear as crystal. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night.
Another space, in another dimension. drift dry, and our bodies become endless flash and energy. So drown with me in the wake sea.
Your album art is like really fun and exceptional, and like it just pulls all those JW themes and artwork in.
Yeah, it's funny because like the artwork from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's already a bizarre subject matter, but there's just something about that era that makes it even more psychedelic.
It totally is. Yeah, it
You can't do that
absolutely
with
is.
you can't do that with their new stuff because it's just land propaganda. But back then it was just, those brothers were doing something because those colors were extra bright. And
There's a lot of lead in the atmosphere back then from the gas.
yeah, it's just like, it's like basically begging to be used on psychedelic artwork about how culty it is. So yeah, I try to throw in stuff on the album covers that, you know, ExJWs can look at and go, oh yeah, I know that Red Dragon.
I showed a friend today, and they're like, "What's with the Hydra?" And I was like, I like that. It's a good name for it. Like, oh, that was from our children's book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's even worse when they realize this isn't even stuff for adults.
Yeah, you wanna see fucked up, check out the My Book of Bible Stories. You know, there's some really bad stuff in there.
Have you seen the T-shirt? They did like the cover of My Book of Bible Stories, the yellow with the yellow script logo or font, and it says My Book of Horror Stories instead of
Yeah.
Bible Stories. It's so funny.
I saw that.
Looking to see if I've got my copy around.
So you were writing that stuff throughout the years before you left officially. Is that
Yeah,
right?
about 3 years before I left, I was writing while I was still in.
I was really curious about the fact that on your Bandcamp you have 3 albums released in the same year, and I was like, did he record all of these in the same year, or did he just upload them all to Bandcamp in that time frame?
A little bit of both. I started writing, and obviously, you know, Xing gives you enough material to write about. And then the pandemic hit, and then I really had a lot of time on my hands. It's just kind of all like merged into one. And I ended up like writing and recording like maybe 80 songs like over 2 years.
Holy shit, man.
But-
Yeah, that's prolific.
But then I didn't have any experience with it. And, you know, musicians are really stingy with information because it's such a hard, you know, industry to get into. So every person I'd ask, like, well, now that I have these songs, like, what's the next step? Well, you got to mix it. Well, how do you do that? Well, can't tell you that. You know, so it's just like I had like 80 songs recorded, but I didn't know how to mix anything. I didn't know how to master anything. So I had to teach that all to myself, which again, the pandemic was perfect timing. So after I had recorded all this stuff, it took me about another year to really study on YouTube, basically how to like mix and master music on your own. And that took a while. And then after you learn the basics, you got to train your ears for it.
So other than the female backing vocals that occasionally pop up, or female lead vocals that occasionally pop up, which I presume aren't you, but maybe they are,
I wish.
you might have a wonderful falsetto. Are you playing everything?
Yeah. So if anyone happens to, you know, stop by and help out with something, I'll notate it. But about 99% of that, the singing and the instruments are me.
Can you disclose the vocalist, the female vocalist?
Oh yeah. It's a old friend of mine named Roxana Garcia. She wasn't a JW, but we dated for a while, and she had a great voice, great taste in music, and kind of knew the genres I was going for. So I was like, some of these songs I wrote with male, female vocals in mind. Would you mind helping out? So she helped me out.
Yeah, she does. She adds a lot to Bloodless. I really enjoyed that record a lot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's just certain things in my head I just couldn't get out of it without a female voice, because a female voice, just the vocal range and the frequencies just cut through music so well, and they cut through male vocals so well that, you know, it just adds a whole nother dimension. And there's just certain things that I couldn't do without it. The song wouldn't be the same. Growing up listening to a lot of music with male, female vocals, you know, like My Bloody Valentine, the Pixies, stuff like that. There's just certain songs that I had written that weren't going to be the same without a female vocal. So fortunately, she agreed to do it for me. She did pretty well for someone who had never, ever recorded before.
She did great. She did
Yeah.
great.
I was
And
very impressed.
she knocked out like probably 4 or 5 songs in a row. I was like, all right, let's just keep going.
Oh, so you
Very
just
cool.
brought her in and kind of like tore through a bunch of stuff in a few sessions. She's not like
Yeah.
working with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, she just agreed to it. I kind of explained to her what was going on, and she understood all the musical references. It was pretty natural. I just told her, this is kind of this kind of song. Okay, what do I do? I'm like, just start singing when I point at you. And she just got through it. And poor thing, like, I'm sure that was just torture for her. She's so shy, and having to sing in front of someone, I'm sure, while she's being recorded, and sometimes, seeing these seeing these words going, what?
I gotta say, your music, coming from as a also lifelong musician type person, I really liked how wide ranging your influences are. You've cast a wide net, you cover a lot of stuff, and you've integrated it. You don't sound like you are trying to sound like your influences. You just sound like somebody who has a good appreciation for a wide variety of interesting music, and you've like taken it and made it your own thing. And I really enjoyed that about listening to your stuff. Scott sent me
Your first album, last summer when I first heard of it from Wesley. He's like, you need to listen to this guy's album. And I looped that all day when I was working one day. I was like, oh, there's these like tones from the Kingdom melodies layered in this one song. And then there's like references from like Russell and then governing body members, but their voice is distorted, so they sound even more evil than just their words. I'm like, this is so weird and cool, and like no one would get it unless they're like, no one would get it the way I'm getting it because I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness.
Scott sent that to me right away too, and so I didn't put it on immediate repeat, but I've like checked it out several times since, and I was like, this guy's doing something. I like what this guy's doing. He's doing something. I like this. This is and I mean this with I hope you understand. You take this as the high compliment and love in which I intend it. I can hear you developing your technique on recording and your palette and your comfort level with what you're doing over the course of the 3 records. Like your each record like steps up the kind of song structure, polish, production, arrangement, the whole thing. Like, and if you listen to like my early records, I do the same thing. You can like hear me kind of going from, I'm just figuring out fucking GarageBand, I don't know how this thing works, plugged in, to like, okay, now I'm doing 43 tracks, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool to hear that from somebody in their music. It's one of my favorite things about listening to like independent musicians putting their stuff out on SoundCloud or Bandcamp or something.
Same.
Is just watching them and hearing them gaining in their confidence and their voice as they go. And like, that was the thing that hit me, because I'd listened to your 2 records before, but I hadn't heard Bloodless. And then today, when I saw that you had released that and I knew we were going to be meeting with you, I put the 3 on in rotation all day too. And it was like to listen to them in order multiple times. It was really cool. It was like kind of watching a flower bloom. So
yeah,
very cool work, man. I got to say, it's very enjoyable. There's a lot of great songs on all 3 of the records that stand out. And I don't know. I just love it. I love it. And if you ever have like questions of like, well, how do I do this on music? Hit me up. I won't hide anything.
Thank you. No, that is so appreciated. Because
I have to say, I pitched to David.
Like, who do I got to kill to mix a song around here?
When we were at the bar for Wesley's show last week, I was like, so I have his friend Ryan, he's got a studio and he's been doing this his whole life. Would you be down to like fly? My dream is that someone flies to Minneapolis and records with Ryan in the studio. And he's like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So I hope that there's a future.
I'm in the studio right now. I mean, look,
yeah. He lives in a library that is also a studio.
I've got 2 drum sets. I've got guitars. I've got my stuff. I've got my Apple II based synthesizer. I mean, I got.
You're living my best life, basically.
Well, this is what happens when you grow up with a mom who plays in a Witness band.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, you were taught to put your music away, and I wasn't. So I got a head start on you, but that's not your fault. So
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to work with other people who are doing cool shit. You're doing cool
Yeah,
shit.
that'd be awesome. I'd love to.
Thing to go back to the records, the first record is interesting, but it's a bit quirky, I thought. And the second record has like some hits on it that I like. There's some songs that I really like. There's a song on the first one I really like, Siren of Titan. But what, to Ryan's point, I feel like the third album just like, it's like the envelope, or like the world is bigger and the separation of frequencies is more distinct, and like and I'm a novice. What you just said, Ryan, is like more on point, but it's like this new album just sounds so refined. It's great. I really enjoyed all the way through.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I probably, to be, brutally honest, I'd probably say like the third one is probably the first one where I actually felt comfortable at the controls. Whereas the first two, I was definitely trying to learn how to fly without wings,
But that's awesome though. I mean, like, honestly, like, everybody has to go through
Oh
it.
yeah. And I like, as you're saying, Ryan, like that's one of the things I love about independent music is, and you can tell when a band can make it big, and just seeing them now raw, like just unabashed, is like one of the most awesome things you can see. I've seen so many bands live when they were just hitting small clubs going, they're going to make it one day. And it's just so awesome to see how they're going to develop. It's hard to decide if you want to see the Beatles on the rooftop, or you want to see them at the Cavern Club. It's just like either way, like different parts of their evolution.
Yeah. And like, even when the band ultimately, we all know about the band that like in their career time never actually make it big, right? Like nobody actually listened to Nick Drake when Nick Drake was alive. Nobody actually listened to there are several bands that were like, that are huge now. Neutral Milk Hotel, right? Like they went on like a 20-year hiatus because nobody bought In the Airplane Over the Sea, except everybody bought In the Airplane Over the Sea for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So like, whether people get there or not, the way I look at it is 99.999% of all the music ever made is made by people who never get famous for it, never make it their full-time living. Yeah. So if you only pay attention to the music that makes it, you're missing out on almost all the music.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so much more fun. It's so much more fun to make real connections with other people through music. Do you have a local music community where you are that have you started to connect to any people?
No, not really. Because since it was a solo project, I never really thought about playing live. Mm-hmm. Then as, more people started following on Instagram, we started getting inquiries about, playing live. I started putting a band together, and then, I ended up getting kicked out of the house, and then the pandemic hit, and everybody kind of went their separate ways during that. So don't really have like a scene per se, or really a band to play live right now. But
well, you shouldn't have started this pandemic. You timed this very badly.
I know. I should have obeyed Jehovah on that one.
Wanted his sweet recording time.
Yeah. It was a trade-off.
Eternal life or more time in the studio.
That's a dilemma for a musician. It's like, well, all this suffering is going to lead to some pretty good songs.
I used to be in a band with a guy who was a pioneer, and I was a pioneer and all that back in high school. And I remember I was on a break from service once at his house, and I was talking to his mom in the kitchen, and she said, I'm so glad you and Chad are making music together. I said, why is that? And she's like, well, until he discovered music, he said he didn't know what he was going to do in the Paradise. He had no idea what he would do for all that time. And then he learned about music and making music, and he's like, oh, Mom, guess what? I finally found something I can do forever.
Wow.
I was like, yeah.
Sleepwood Dojo. Chad Rieger, Sleepwood Dojo.
No, this was a different Chad.
Oh, a different Chad.
Not Chad Rieger. It was Chad Astleford back in the Purple Triangles days.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's interesting though, what you said, David, that you felt like you had to not make music because you grew up. a little bit or whatever? Like it wasn't allowed in your family or in your congregation or?
Not really. The thing with being fourth generation, at least for me, was there's just so much pressure. There's so much pressure. So by 18 and 19, like if I wasn't married and at least a ministerial servant, like it's like what's going on with David kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the majority of my family was in the Spanish, and like that's a whole cult within a cult. Like to be in a Spanish JW, it's like growing up in the Spanish, like you're warned about American congregations. Like it's like
So shocking.
yeah, it's just like, man, you might as well have left Jehovah if you're going to move to an English congregation. Like they don't have any rules. Like the Spanish, they just consider like American brothers and sisters like so liberal. And they're just not conservative enough. So
Wow.
yeah, so there's a lot of pressure because it's family, like in Hispanic culture, like family and religion are just so hard to separate in general. And then when you turn it up a level and it's a cult and a Spanish cult, then it's bigger. And it's funny too, I was talking about someone with this the other day, and I told them, I never noticed it growing up, but even though in the Spanish congregation, it's a congregation of 300 people. They're huge congregations. All the elders are Hispanic, but the circuit overseers were always white.
Oh.
And I never ever met a Hispanic circuit overseer, and it's just like it's funny how like
wow,
weird connection between the two cultures, because it's like on the one hand it's like, well, the American brothers are just too liberal, but at the same time it's just like, well, he comes from an American congregation, so his word is like God's word.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
Who also said something like that was Joe Mitchell from Nobody Asked Us to Do This podcast that we did in New York City. Joe and Ruben came down for the screening there. Joe said something that because he's a black man, and he was saying how there's not completely segregated, of course, they're not segregated congregations, but like there's not really black overseers or circuit overseers. And so it's like a white man coming to talk to black people and tell them to straighten up their ways or whatever. And I'd never thought of that. And we didn't have a lot of diversity where I'm from, or where you and I are from, Ryan, but there's some, but it's just not so distinct.
No, but that kind of puts a new spin on like the fact that like my dad learned Vietnamese to go be an elder in a Vietnamese congregation. Believe it or not, my dad's not Vietnamese. I can my sister learned and her husband, who in his defense is Japanese, they learned Hmong to go convert that community of immigrants to a country. They wound up actually going to California to help translate witness literature into Hmong. I'm trying to think of other like
they don't trust people from their own that particular community to run the show.
Why is it white people going and doing that?
Yeah, it's very similar to like evangelical churches going to third world countries and just converting thousands in one day. It's like it really is like the same scheme, because when I was like getting out and analyzing the whole financial side of how the Watchtower makes money and seeing the business side of it and understanding why they're losing so much money. Because like I used to work in financing, and when I saw certain things, I would think of when companies were going out of business and all the little cuts they would make that that they could do without worrying the board of directors and worrying the employees. And I started seeing this stuff, and I'm going, the society is losing money, but I don't understand why. And then when you start to realize, well, the majority of witnesses live in third world countries, but they depend on, the 2% of rich witnesses to support the other 98%. So, when you start getting lawsuits in there, it's just like, well, we need to build 500 kingdom halls in Africa, but because there's thousands that want to get baptized, but we need these brothers in America or England to pay for it. So we got to have them downsize and start, like when I was seeing them just throwing all these congregations together, people driving from out of town, and I'm just going, they're losing money. Now they're only printing 3 magazines a year. Man, they're losing money. Like I was just seeing like, oh, it's because, they depend on these people to support these people. And I'm like, how's that different than evangelical churches?
You're totally right, man. That's exactly. And I haven't been on the inside of this, so I find this fascinating. And I want to hear you say more on this, because I haven't set foot in a Kingdom Hall since my brother's funeral in 2005. So I've missed the last, 16 years, 15, 16, 17 years, whatever the hell. And I know they changed the Bible to be silver. They got everybody iPads and they shut half the congregations down. That's basically what I know.
Yeah.
And it all smells like you're saying, like financial crisis.
Yeah.
Right. Like they sold off all the high value real estate. They took over a bunch of congregations and made them downsize. They moved everything to digital stuff that doesn't cost anything. They got rid of all the printing. Like it feels like, and I too have a, corporate America job. I don't work in finance. I'm an IT guy, but still I know how these things go. You can smell it if you've been in enough companies.
Yep.
It smells like a company that's running out of business, running out of customers.
Yep. That's exactly what it is.
That's how it felt to you in there.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, just from the background I had in some previous jobs. I started just putting it all together and going, they're losing money. Like,
how does it feel within the congregations then? Like, I mean, how have these changes been? How have people adjusted to this? Like, did people freak out when they were taking Watchtowers away? I mean, I'm curious. Like, can you tell me how the experience has been like that I missed?
So basically, what they had to do was just to get everybody to accept it without questioning it. And the way they would spin it was, we're so close to the end. That was always the excuse. We're so close to the end. So if the Great Tribulation hits next week, don't we all want to be like together in one congregation? It was the fear. And well, we only are printing things digitally now because the Jehovahs is speeding up the work, and you need to move to this congregation now. And a lot of those, the result of separating those congregations and then grouping them together was a lot of families got separated.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of resistance of, families not wanting to move to new congregations because families were getting separated. And then they started issuing all these videos of like, here's good sister. Oh, don't question the congregations moving together. Here's bad sister. Oh, can you believe we need to go to a different congregation? So like they would start, this programming started after that.
Wow.
And the only thing I could think of is like, well, that means it's happening. Like it's got to be happening. Or else they wouldn't be putting this out on the convention videos of all things. And then they came out with this video of, some brother basically finding like contradictions in their own literature, and how like there is the good brothers that were like, shouldn't question anything. And there's the bad brothers that were like, see, the end's not coming. And they're going to bring up things like lawsuits. They're going to bring up lies like this and that. And then that's when it really started clicking, going, do you think we might be the baddies?
Good reference. Good reference.
Well, like at that point, I'm just like, but why skulls?
So wait, so here's the thing that I can't wrap my brain around. And again, I've been out of it for a little bit, and I don't honestly, other than this podcast and the fact that Scott went and made a movie about it, I kind of stopped thinking about witnessy stuff a long time ago. So I kind of, got busy with other stuff. I'm not one of those obsessive ex-witnesses. I kind of got through it and moved on, but this is still awesome to meet people like you. So I'm not, but what I'm saying is like, it's weird to me to envision going to a meeting and watching a talk on a TV instead of having people giving talks. Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's really weird. Like right before I left, they completely restructured the whole entire meeting. Like they completely changed, like they got rid of the theocratic ministry school.
That was the only fun one because you got to give talks sometimes, and
Yeah.
like
And what I noticed was the way they changed it, it just created even less and less space for like critical thinking. Because the way it was set up before, if you gave a talk, I forgot what number is what, but if you gave a number 4, you had to do your own material, you had to put in your own words, you had to do your own references. And the way it was set up new, there wasn't any of that anymore. You basically were just reading stuff or watching someone do a talk on a TV.
wow.
I'm just like, wow, they're really like trying to constrict anybody from having any thoughts like on their own. It's really just, we're going to simplify it so that it's just you guys regurgitating information.
I learned so much on the theocratic ministry school. I mean, honestly, by the time I took speech class in high school, I had been giving talks since I was 5.
Yeah.
It was great. And I still remember fondly doing talks on the ministry school. I actually got to give a number 4 on a convention once, and that was like the biggest honor of my entire witness life, right? Like it was the greatest thing ever. And it makes me so sad if they've taken away this one part where you actually could do anything.
Yeah, and actually learn a skill that can be applicable outside of it. Oh yeah, they took all that.
Heartbreaking.
It's really from 1984. Like if you watch the original one with everyone has a screen in the room and it broadcasts stuff and you have to pay attention, and they have a camera that can tell if you're watching or not. And they're like, you stand up.
That's really creepy.
It's a complete like program now. Like it's so weird because like when you think about like the two places where witnesses could kind of think for themselves without Big Brother watching, you know, to use your analogy, was book studies and the theocratic ministry school, because a lot of it was just like chatting in your own words. What
happened to book studies?
Oh, they got rid of those too.
Wow.
There's no book studies at all.
You have to go to the Kingdom Hall twice.
Yeah,
or Zoom now twice.
Yeah, there's only 2 meetings a week now.
So the Watchtower, and you have a lecture.
Yes, they shortened the public talk to only 30 minutes, and then they simplified the Watchtower and shortened that, and then the other night is where they do the whole program thing.
It sounds like they're gonna reduce this thing down to like a TikTok stream, and that's it.
It'll just be people governing body dancing. That's it.
Yes, please follow governing body member blah blah blah.
If you don't like the post,
dance craze.
Yeah. You get in trouble if you don't like the post. You'll be taken to the virtual back room in Zoom.
I'm just now picturing somebody doing basically the Macarena to "Dark Days Are Here and Live in Fear," and just
Somebody out there, please make that.
I'd get on TikTok just to see that.
Yeah. Seriously.
On the music side, what was it like to make those albums and to be making those albums? Like, how does that feel? Like, what are you getting from it?
At first, it was just like therapy. A lot of people have gone to therapy after exiting, and there's a lot of benefits to that. But just the way everything happened, wasn't really an option for me. But I had to get all of these emotions and thoughts and trauma out of my head, or else it was going to drive me crazy. And so my job at the time, I happened to have a really cool boss, and he was really into music too. And he used to have a lot of friends that were independent hip hop artists in LA and Long Beach. So he used to let them use our back office as like a little recording room to kind of help them cut costs and stuff. And he set up like a little studio back there for his friends. And so as I was exiting and writing music and going through all this, I was like, how can I not? Like, I need to get all this out of my head. There's literally a recording studio in the back of my office. I need to either do something about this or I'm going to go nuts.
That was what I wanted to know, is where and how did you get access to doing the recording if you were, going through all of these hard times? And it sounds like a pretty pretty nice coincidence that your therapy turned out to be a recording studio in your office.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
That was one of the lights ahead of in the tunnel through that whole process, and I took advantage of it. So I just had a chat with my boss, promise him, never interfere with work. So, I'd get in an hour early, or I'd shut in for lunch, or I'd stay after work, and I would just write and record. And I guess, the pressure kind of was just like, back in the day when they had the pressure of tape, you gotta make this time useful. I couldn't just fuck around whenever I wanted. So
this explains a lot, man. This explains a lot. Because the prolificity and the obvious, like it feels like it was like breathing, like you had to do it, and it comes across in the recordings, and that makes sense. You were under a fairly ridiculous amount of pressure. You were looking for a relief valve, and sometimes art is best when there's constraints and pressure, right? It like forces you to sharpen it.
It really does. And art, in whatever form it is, really is just trying to express the human condition, and so much of the human condition is suffering. And that's one thing I realized too, is like why propaganda art is just so fucking lame, because there is no suffering according to witnesses. There is no suffering according to North Korea. Everything's perfect and everything is the way it's going to be, or everything's going to get better soon.
Yeah.
And you're not really allowed to express suffering in those kind of controlled settings. And it was just an amazing outlet. And our office happened to be on Saturn Street. So when I wrote the first album, being isolated and that being really the only refuge I had, the only place I could be myself and not have to be a witness, was this little studio on Saturn Street. So I was just like, what better name than Stranded on Saturn for how I feel right now?
I got it.
Which was so funny, because after I put that all together, I realized that the initials are SOS. It's like, wow. It wrote itself, I guess.
Do you still have access to this? Is this still something that you're able to do?
Oh no. That was a one in a lifetime thing. That's why I tried to record as much as I could.
Okay.
Because I figured once my family found out and once we had to leave, I was probably gonna have to lose my job, and I did end up losing my job. So
a witness employer?
No, but I had 4 kids when I was married, and they were all homeschooled because of the religion. And we went from being part of this organization and everything to having 4 kids in public school and us being homeless, and none of our family or friends would watch the kids for us or help us out.
You lived with witnesses?
Yeah, we lived with witnesses.
Gotcha.
We lived with witness family. After our 4th child, everything that happened with it, the complications from that birth, we ended up moving in with witness family. And then we got outed while we were living there. And so we just lost everything all at once, like within probably a couple of weeks of them finding out. Like,
wow.
They're like, you guys need to leave. And yeah, they started calling, like, I come home and they call the cops on us.
Whoa.
Like, for the most random stuff, my father-in-law would just call the cops on me.
Wow.
Yeah. Like I remember one time I was cleaning the living room listening to like Wu-Tang and it offended him. And the next thing I knew, there was a cop in the living room, and I was just like, what the heck?
Come on, Rizzo's a hero. Didn't you know that?
I was just like, wow. So yeah, it just got to that
pretty
point.
sure cleaning the living room while listening to Wu-Tang is not illegal.
Yeah, right. What are the cops gonna do?
I know.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm guilty of having done that, and
Call the
I don't remember
Stasi.
any police involvement.
Call the JW Stasi and get that number. That makes more sense. This guy is violating our music laws. He's listening to unacceptable art forms.
Well, wait. So then, did you? Well, okay. First off, is Bloodless a nod to Loveless?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just had to check. I figured it was, but
What's Loveless? I don't actually know.
MBV, man, catch up.
Yeah, one of their greatest albums.
MVB.
That's My Bloody Valentine,
Oh,
Scott.
okay, MVB. Okay, yeah, I'm not so familiar with them.
Scott's not into the shoegaze.
I am. I was listening to a shoegaze playlist all day. Well, after, in between listening to your albums.
Can I recommend, Scott, go find something by Slow Dive and something by My Bloody Valentine, and just put them both on until your brain melts.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then put on the Levone Psychotic Requiem and do some acid.
Yeah.
But anyways,
I'll second.
I've done the last one before.
yeah, I know you dropped acid to the Levone. Everybody drops acid to the Levone. That was my band in high school with my brother, by the way, David.
Well, that'll be
but
my
what-
next band the next time I drop.
All right. Psychotic Requiem, which I've never done acid to, but I helped record, is allegedly very good for that. So, you know,
I love the name. It's a funny thing. You don't know much about Ryan's history because I think you just learned of him today. But his first band, As Witnesses, put out an album called Psychotic Requiem. Is it your first album? Yeah.
That wasn't their first. No,
okay.
that was like our fifth or something. But
Oh, wow.
our first one was called Psychotrauma.
Psychotrauma. Okay, that's what I
And
was
then
thinking
we
of.
did another one called We Don't Exist. And then we did one called Nuke and Lodge Tysonberry. Then we did Earth Mother and Psychotic Requiem. So we were definitely doing the freak flag thing as witness
Oh
kids.
yeah. Oh yeah.
We
But
were
also, like, these are witness kids, like, completely isolated, making stuff with titles that are like almost like screaming for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote a song on I want to say it was on the second Levone album. I had a song called Schizophrenic Overload, in which I was in seventh grade. I was writing, as I walk down the path I've chosen for myself, I begin to wonder why I put my life on a shelf. I look deeper and deeper and deeper and wish I could rise, look into my eyes. What do you see? Schizophrenic. And it was about being a witness who was having doubts.
Oh yeah.
I was in seventh grade.
That's pretty heavy.
I didn't leave till I was 30.
Oh wow.
So
Damn.
I was wrestling very young. I think
Yeah.
for me, I'm a bit older than you guys. I think I was like 10 when the Creation book came out in the 80s.
Mhm.
And I read that cover to cover because I was starting to wonder if evolution or creation made sense. And I was starting to worry that, it was the Cold War and we were always hearing from like Reagan and shit that we were all going to die from nuclear war. But I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about that because God's not going to let that happen because we're going to have Armageddon instead. So we get a different Holocaust, but it's a good one that I get to live through. And I was really obsessed about it. And really spent most of my teenage years just trying to self-program my brain to stick with this. And I wound up deciding that music was the best mental outlet that I could have. I could make music. My brother was a musician. My other brother was a musician. My mom was a singer. Like, if I didn't have music, I probably would have left the Witnesses when I was 16. As a musician, I was able to write lyrics that described what I was feeling in oblique ways that other people wouldn't know what I was saying, but I could say it and I could get it out of my system. And that's why I started Jehovah's Witness record label, and why we did, like, I don't know if you've seen Scott's movie or not, Witness Underground, the picture behind Scott and the reason for the whole podcast. Music was the lifesaver for me, but it also kind of allowed me to stay a witness for a long time when I wouldn't have. We did some really freaky stuff. We were listening to the Grateful Dead and Frank Zappa and Pink Floyd and still being good witnesses. And that's why it's just funny to hear like your feeling of like, well, as a fourth generation witness, I had to put music away, like, man, dude, how did you do it?
It was hard. It was really hard. I had been playing music since I was like 11. But
It shows you're good.
Oh, thanks. But I didn't play for a while. Probably didn't start really playing again until I was about 30. Stopped probably playing around 18 or 19. Stopped playing and then played for about 10 years.
I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you. Thank you.